For some reason, it seems to me that Trump wants to end this war at any cost and then start cooperating with Russia. That is why Lutnick and Besant were there.
Exactly, but at the same time, please note what far-reaching plans there were. Lunch, a trip around Alaska, even to an Orthodox church. By the way, especially Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State of the first administration of Donald Trump, noted. How specific does Vladimir Putin's gratitude for the preservation of the Orthodox heritage of Alaska from a KGB officer look like? The KGB, which simply destroyed churches, killed priests, and also and especially hated priests abroad, the church abroad, because it was impossible to penetrate it so easily. These were the far-reaching plans, and they had to be in both places. And the White House published Donald Trump's schedule in advance. He was supposed to leave at 9:40 a.m. Alaska time, that is, it was supposed to be literally almost 9 a.m. today, that is, 8:40 a.m. in European time, and nothing like that. It all ended very quickly, not 5 or 6 hours. When Peskov said that the meeting between Trump and Putin could last, in my opinion, even he said 6 to 7 hours, it seemed to me that it was literally a threat from Peskov. But nothing of the kind. Yes, 2 hours 40 minutes is also a decent time, then, as you said exactly, 8 minutes, Putin, 3.5 minutes, Trump. That's all, they set out and all went away. Therefore, it seems to me that, yes, they counted on Besant, and on Lutnick, and on Kirill Dmitriev, and on all the various representatives on both sides, and nothing, apparently, there were no economic negotiations. Symbolically, they were, but all we saw from Kirill Dmitriev was how he went to look at a bear, which means he lives there in Alaska. That's all, and his blessings are blissful photos, of course, that's all from there. That's all, so it probably really just didn't come to this, we didn't get around to it. What does it show us? That really, despite all the good face, so to speak, there are still no points of contact, the main ones, in the end.
Alexandra, Trump also recalled in an interview, if I'm not mistaken, in Fox News, and about China, he said that again, there will be no duties, we understand, because these duties will ricochet more painfully on the United States, so there is a 90-day truce in tariffs, but still he said the following that in fact Russia and China are enemies because Russia is a territory, China is a population. And here is Biden and again Obama, he always has this past syndrome, he said that they made it so that they were friends. Do you really think that Trump continues to sincerely believe that he can tear Russia away from China with these steps?
He clearly wanted to do this too, and it seems to me that the discussion did not come to this, they did not get around to it, so to speak, but because there is indeed a main obstacle, because Donald Trump said that we agreed on many things, but on one, the main thing, we did not agree. This is the main thing, probably the territory of Ukraine, this is the main thing, probably exactly what does not make it possible to really go further. In general, this entire meeting, as we have discussed many times, personal communication is generally important for Donald Trump. It is important to him, it seems to him that if he personally sits together, opposite or at the same table or next to his opponent, he will be able to achieve everything with his power of persuasion, charisma. The memoirs of Trump administration employees and memories of Trump as a businessman indicate that personal communication and diplomacy are crucial for him. This meeting showed Donald Trump that personal communication does not work with Vladimir Putin. And there is no time to talk about economic cooperation, about some kind of separation from China, which we would like to do. Of course, this is all Alaska, this is the entire Arctic region, in fact, we started there from Greenland. As we all remember, we have discussed many times, Greenland will be the 51st or 52nd state, because the 51st will be Canada. How will it be? No, nothing, no discussion of the Arctic, apparently, took place. Still, indeed, there is this border. These are the very red lines that are all notorious, different, incomprehensible in Putin's book. Trump probably has these red lines. Still, in the presence, no matter how favorable Steve Witkoff is, and still Marco Rubio looks at it all a little differently, at least he knows the real situation and he understands what it is about. This still does not make it possible to move on to these wonderful discussions about China, Alaska, and I mean the Arctic, Alaska as the Arctic region, as the United States access to the Arctic region. No, it seems to me that nothing worked out here. In an interview with Fox News, by the way, Donald Trump looked much more benign than during this pseudo-press conference. I don't even dare to call it a press conference. Some kind of pseudo-meeting. These statements, it seems to me, maybe you will not agree with me, it seems to me that Caroline Levitt and Dmitry Peskov could definitely come out, read them, and that's it. Because there is nothing, absolutely nothing. Donald Trump claimed progress in a Fox News interview, but nothing seemed to happen.
Moreover, Levitt and Peskov read their protocol speeches much better. Alexandra, I miss the times when we talked and were horrified about what Elon Musk would do, and what his daughter would do. I remember that we even counted at what minute we would talk about it, and now I understand that it was just flowers. The domestic policy of the United States of America would like to ask you one last question. The latest polls, by the way, polls from the company, as far as I understand and how correctly I am speaking, the one that predicted Trump's victory in the election, they say that for the third month in a row, the Democrats plus 0.5% are ahead of the Republicans, regardless of the districts, including that there is not even a territory now, so to speak, in the United States of America, where Republicans would win the 2026 elections to Congress in the fall. How much can this really affect and put pressure on Trump?
This puts a lot of pressure on Trump and in general everything that is happening, even at the end, but still to the point. In general, Trump has a lot of problems in US domestic politics now, and the fact that everyone, just everyone, without exception, is talking about Alaska is very good. This gives Donald Trump an opportunity to breathe out, because in Texas there are problems with changing the boundaries of constituencies, and in Washington there are problems. The National Guard is being introduced into D.C. Washington and the residents of Washington themselves are protesting, and many other difficulties in general in US domestic politics, and the Democrats are slightly intensifying, somehow coming to their senses a little, just against the background of these problems of domestic political and, of course, now for Donald Trump, this is all. It all resembles the very same theory of flooded space. There are so many stuffed stories, so much information, so much misinformation, which is very important. How many sources, so-and-so, said this, said that. All this really seems like a distraction and in general everything that is happening now, and it is not for nothing that I thank you for citing Fox News, CNN, Sky News, and so on, various sources, and I also specifically cited Fox News. What the conservative media said, what it all looks like, what it is. For the conservative media, all this doesn't look good, and of course, Donald Trump and the Republicans may pay for it in 2026. Catastrophe, which terrifies me. When we talk about this, we are talking about November 2026. We are talking against the backdrop of war, against the backdrop of the fact that people are dying every day. Russia is bombing every day, attacks every day and so on. That's what is terrible. We could have waited if there was a freeze at least. If there was at least some kind of stop, we could have waited. But, of course, this is what terrifies me, because we are talking about this against the backdrop of the war. This is the horror. But in general, if in isolation from foreign policy, in the domestic policy of the United States, the situation of the Republicans is getting worse and worse. And in general, indeed, the Democrats may win the midterm elections here, although they themselves, as we have also discussed many times, also have a lot of problems.
Yes, Alexandra, I would also like to ask, how much do you think Trump's domestic policy and internal problems will affect his external decisions?
Domestic politics is now influencing, apparently, as a distraction, so we need to divert attention from domestic politics, and the Epstein file, which, mind you, everyone has forgotten about now, and investigations into Russia, in general, about the fact that the Obama administration, allegedly, forged some documents on Russia's interference. Russia interfered. No one denies this. It would also be a distraction. And everything that happens in Texas and in Washington, that's all. So it seems that domestic politics here in this sense have an impact. Of course, there will be polls now, and not only about how 85% of Americans do not trust Putin, and they believe, and 50% consider Russia an enemy, in principle, but also about Volodymyr Zelensky. Of course, on the eve of his visit, there will be polls. This may have an impact, because when we say 85% do not trust Putin, and, accordingly, have a negative attitude towards it, then we understand that both Democrats and Republicans here, and it doesn't matter what party affiliation, there is a very clear understanding, and, accordingly, a completely different situation with Ukraine is developing. This also has a kind of influence on Donald Trump, especially given that they are looking at the midterm elections anyway.
Alexandra, I deceived you again, because I remembered one more question. Before our conversation, I had a live broadcast. I talked with our audience for 3 hours, and interestingly, I remembered Putin's statements and immediately remembered you. Why such a connection? Because in a conversation with Trump at a press conference, he said that the 2020 elections were rigged, because, it turns out, in the United States of America, they vote by mail, but they do not vote by mail anywhere else, and I talked about this on the air, recalled a detailed analysis in your story that in fact this is the most secure way of voting.
Exactly. In general, all this is, of course, a game for Donald Trump, because the main thing is that the elections are rigged, because the system is not like that, the system and so on. Trump generally likes to say that the system is allegedly set up in favor of the Democrats and therefore he lost in 2020. As for voting by mail, this is, first of all, one of the oldest types of voting in the United States. Why do Americans also like to say that during our war in the United States, we actually voted by mail? Indeed, during the Civil War there was voting by mail. Indeed, this is true. But since there has been this vote since the beginning of the 19th century, there is even an American joke that it is easier to forge a $100 bill than voting by mail. It is much easier to draw it, because there is so much printing, so many ways of protection, and I myself have been to these centers that specially take political scientists, journalists, specifically so that people understand how all this is done. Indeed, everything is protected there, everyone is very separate, no one is next to each other, there is tracking everywhere it is really so. I haven't been inside banks or where money is printed, but it seems that it's really that serious, and mail-in voting is certainly one of the most secure in the United States. Because it has existed since the beginning of the 19th century.